Hey everyone, we're back. It's been a while since I've done an interview. It's nice to be back after the Easter weekend. So if you guys celebrated, I hope it was a good one with family. And if you didn't, I hope it was a good one anyways. We have a special guest today from Silo Finance, AJ. Thanks for joining us, sir. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having
Welcome.
me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Silo Finance, and yeah, what brings you here.
Yeah, as I'm one of the core contributors, one of the four people that founded the project back in October 2021 after we graduated from ETH Global. Uh, my background is in economics. I've been in crypto since 2015. Super an advocate for you know democratizing access to everything. Uh, so yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a great journey since we started the Silo.
So when did you guys actually start Silo? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so the idea came from really from our user. We're heavy DeFi users. You farm tokens and you try to leverage, and there are no lending markets, and you dive into the reason, and you kind of we come across back then we come across this. I would say the architecture, or at least the way that lending apps are built, that limit the adding more and more collateral because of risk. So we thought like, well, let's think about a way to create a lending market that can scale, that can add more token assets, and those token assets can be used as collateral, so you could borrow against them. And we entered the hackathon back then, I think in September, for like 21 days. We came up with a proof of concept, and we won. We're one of the winners of the hackathon. And then October started kind of putting together everything about, like, we basically putting together a project, so community building, and then raising through uh, basically token auction, and hiring more core contributors. And fast forward today, you can see like we're on two chains. Where hopefully we've started to see product market fit.
Okay, and then in terms of your exposure right now, where are you guys based? Where's your home at the moment in terms of you guys are on Arbitrum, Ethereum? Where are you currently based?
Ethereum, number
Okay,
one, and
okay,
we've launched like I'd say about a month ago or over a month, um, on Arbitrum. So
okay.
we're yeah, yeah.
Great. I think in terms of kind of like this journey that you guys have traveled, and it's something that we don't, I think we kind of like undervalue the process in terms of what you just described now. Is like get together, you go to a hackathon, you obviously try something, it gets accepted as something that's obviously there's a demand for it, market fit. What are the main kind of like driving forces behind, you deciding, okay, well, maybe it's time that we actually did this as a project and let's like do the whole thing, because it's not easy, right? I mean, it's fine when
Yeah.
kind of like fooling around and trying different things. I'm not saying that you were fooling around, but it's kind of like, I think in many ways, Blockmates, we did fool around with a lot of stuff, but then it becomes quite a serious thing. And it's like, I'm just curious, were there catalysts that allowed you guys to decide, hang on a second, like this is something that we can take further? Or was it just, okay, it's an idea, let's just try it out?
It's exactly that, actually. Let's try it out. And but
Yeah.
then back in 2018, we actually I myself was also a co-founder of. We were trying to build an L1 for the music industry. And
Oh,
before
wow.
that,
Okay.
I was in Web 2 and tried to launch a couple of businesses. So this idea of let's take an idea to a project, to a company I'm familiar with, and the agony they go through to do that. And actually, to tell you the truth, you start as a project. You start thinking like, well, let me see if it's a viable idea. At least that's how we think in Web 2. Let's see if there's a viable idea, and we like to put everything behind it. So we've kind of focused on it 100% of our times. We've given up everything for it. And then back then, let's see if there's an acceptance. And a few things happened back then that kind of validated the idea. We didn't have a product. So it was, you're trying to validate the idea. Back then, Cream Finance got hacked for the second time. Venus also had been hacked on a Binance Smart Chain, and then Rari had some issues, and also was actually a great product that kind of like validated the direction we're going into. So kind of gave us a bit of a confidence that we were going in the right direction. So we kept
Yes.
pushing, and early on, the community after the hackathon, we had like 50, 100 people around us saying that, well, that's a good idea, and then we raised through the token auction, and that validated also at least a little bit of push. It was actually a different market back then. You could raise for really anything, so you could
Yeah.
also be entering a gray area. So raising money is not necessarily a validation of the idea back then. But that was really what kept us going. And then when we started hiring as well, and you started coming across great candidates that wanting to join the project, and then that also gave us kind of like, all right, well, we're doing something here. So we're trying to build, but the process is extremely difficult, but at the same time joyous. Really, you kind of I personally drive a lot of happiness from it, to be honest with you. But as everything in life, also pain, comes with it. It's just another side of the coin, really.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you are kind of like a serial entrepreneur, but also a serial pain seeker. I can relate to that. I've never really had a job my entire life. I've always done my own thing. I've had my own businesses, and I think that you answered the question quite beautifully, because there is a certain quality that this space demands from founders, and that is that you've got to constantly be seeking it out, and that's exactly what you guys have done, right? It's like we know the idea makes sense. We've got the experience that allows us to make those assumptions. Cool, let's put it into play and see what the result is. But I think what's really interesting about Silo is that you guys haven't done anything in terms of the value proposition. You guys haven't done anything really unique at the starting point. But what's really unique about your project, there's quite a few things, and I'd like for you to just go through those aspects. I mean, I know the name Silo says it all, but I'll let you talk about it and just talk us through it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the way we think about it is, well, how do you scale DeFi? You need lending markets, and lending markets, you have to isolate risk in order to create lending markets for really any token asset. So you're kind of creating a marketplace where there is the two token holders, and each is a counterpart risk, your risk counterpart, basically. So if you have USDC and you have ETH, well, USDC becomes the counterpart to ETH, and ETH counterpart to USDC. And now you've connected to different individuals. One of them is a lender, one of them is depositor, or it could be both. So risk isolation, you basically create a lending market where a token can be collateral to borrow another token, and it's risk isolated from whatever happens in the protocol. So if there is an exploit, it does not spread. There's no contagion or risk contagion that can spread from market to another. Now that gives you a lot of basically advantages, enables lots of use cases, but also it creates some problems, and we're aware of those problems. So number one, you can technically create a market for really any token as long as you can find a counterpart to you. So pretty much like the same way we take loans in our bank, or deposit our money in a bank, well, you would like your money to be borrowed by someone you trust. Now, in crypto, you don't know the person. There is really you cannot really trust the person. You trust the collateral they provide. Well, can I
Correct.
provide collateral or not? Can I trust it or not? Well, that can be very, very different. You can trust the OM as collateral, maybe someone else does not. So then don't use that market. Just move on, right? Maybe you trust Bitcoin, maybe other people don't trust Bitcoin. So then I will not lend my USDC against Bitcoin. And that's exactly what we would do. So we create those markets, and you can customize your risk then.
Okay.
So if you do not trust the ARB token, well, don't deposit USDC then there. Just go trust somewhere at another market, another token asset, basically. So that means that we can create an infinite number of markets, technically speaking, on any chain, really, on its L2 or side chain. So that's a huge advantage. It's just simply those markets do not exist. So we talk to projects every day, and everyone wants a market because, again, they have their communities, they trust that token as collateral, right? So Jones,
Yes.
for example, Jones users, holders, they trust Jones. So maybe also within that community, there is a USDC depositor as well that trusts Jones as a collateral, and then you create a market. Maybe that market does not create $1 billion. It doesn't matter. What matters is you just connected two different people really in a market. So back to my advantages, that gives you an infinite number of technically speaking, any markets. Number two, that's the best way to customize or modulate risk because you just participate in markets you trust. That's great. Number two. Number three, you really don't need caps anymore. The market, technically speaking, the market will be capped automatically based on finding the counterpart risk, basic risk takers in the market. So, so to give you an example, today CBE is capped at $30 million deposit, I think, in AAVE 3. That's great. It's actually a great cap. However, just one individual deposited and took the cap, right? And so the governance has to kind of intervene every time to increase the cap. In our market, we have CBE ETH market. Well, if you can find $100 million ETH or someone to give you $100 million, well, the market can scale automatically based on liquidity, based on, you don't need governance. You don't need anything like that, really. So market can scale technically. So that also, so again, that's that creates lots of, I would say, advantages to even a project integrating on top of that market, because now you know that there's no governance. It's just simply, I provide capital, I deposit and I borrow, so that market can scale without any kind of hindrance in the system. So as you can see now, it's the value proposition might not be obvious on at the surface, but it actually creates lots of dynamics, great dynamics for the system or for the DeFi. On the negative side, you also fragment liquidity because now ETH has to be deposited maybe 10 markets, but there is really no silver bullet in DeFi. We'll always compromise on something.
So, I mean, you have intimated around kind of like the protocol mechanism itself, because the very essence of the word silo is exactly how you guys, from my understanding of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's all about mitigating the risk, right? Because you are dealing with so many different collateralized aspects to this thing. Because if you look at AAVE, if you look at a lot of the lending platforms that have been around kind of like from a legacy perspective, they only primarily focus, with your ETH, your BTC, your USDC, because, they're well known, there's plenty of liquidity. And you guys have decided to kind of step outside of that because you see the value in the collateral that something like ARB token, for example, has, or Balancer, or whatever the case might be. Obviously, there's value there because you've got huge TVLs, and you guys are obviously trying to access that. But now at the same time, you're creating. Are they pools from a protocol mechanism which allow people to then deposit and then almost like cross-pollinate that liquidity? How does the mechanism work exactly?
So you launch a market, let's say for Balancer.
Yes.
That's what we call the base asset. And then it is automatically paired with ETH and our stablecoin. So technically you have a 3 asset pools across the protocol. You deposit Balancer and you borrow ETH. If someone wants to deposit, if someone wants to borrow Balancer, they have to collateralize ETH. So technically speaking, the Balancer user is trusting ETH collateral, and the ETH depositor is trusting the Balancer collateral. And this kind of creates a simple mechanism. So a Balancer user cannot borrow USDC directly. They'll have first to borrow ETH and then take the ETH to the USDC market, deposit it, and borrow ETH. So that's kind of we create the separation. and that serves as a way, built-in way to always contain risk in a market at a time.
Okay, so I mean that's the innovation that really impressed. I think all of us at Blockmates was kind of like, because obviously we've had a ton of exploits, a ton of, kind of like people coming in exploiting a particular pool or a market, and you guys are effectively like isolating that whole aspect to it.
Exactly.
In terms of the lending market itself, so you opened kind of like a little bit of a Pandora's box, because you've mentioned your own stablecoin, which I want to get into. But firstly, I want to just chat about, I mean, obviously, if I'm now going to come in and do a lending process and go through the motions of this, what liquidation process have you guys got in place? And, what are the kind of like benefits to, your community and to the stakers within the context of what Silo is doing?
Right. Well, we have a large liquidation penalty that we implement today, which might it disadvantages the user being liquidated and advantages the depositor, basically, not the borrower. And why? Because, and again, this is really V1. We've shipped tons of ideas. Well, now we're being validated or invalidated. So hopefully in future versions we'll be fixing them. But large penalty, liquidation penalty, means that if it's a long tail asset, and long tail assets tend to be extremely difficult to liquidate, not without a huge price impact and sometimes slippage. So if you factor all that, you really need enough, if a big enough fee, so you can always make sure you could liquidate this long tail asset and pay back the loan and protect the depositor. And we do full collateral liquidation. We don't do partial liquidation, and also that limits us, but also protects us from protects the depositor. Sometimes in partial liquidation, especially for long tail assets, you might find it difficult to liquidate a small of that collateral, because liquidity can simply dry up really rapidly. So that's really the liquidation. Liquidation is really pretty much the same, similar process, but we do full liquidation and we use higher penalties for assets that we deem risky. So the riskier, the higher the fee.
So, I mean, was that something that you guys kind of like, did you use AAVE as kind of like a reference point from that perspective? Because I think AAVE has always been like really good. I mean, we know this, it kind of like, it outlasted Three Arrows Capital. We saw all of that kind of unfold. I mean, it was quite remarkable how efficient
Absolutely.
it was. Yeah. I mean, it was brilliant.
Compound and AAVE, there is a reason why they only list a small set of collateral. They accept small set of collateral assets, really. These assets are super liquid, so you could always liquidate. So there's no issue at all. AAVE was more aggressive than Compound. Compound is the extremely traditional, old school. I think I love that about them, of course. AAVE went aggressive. At one point, they had Sushi. They had like really as collateral. They had like aggressive. And if you remember, like a few months ago, when there was an attempt to attack Curve became less liquid on the market. But then the deposit were like just so much, so you could not necessarily liquidate Curve. They came very close, but it was an attack, obviously, and they had to do they have to go out of their way to liquidate. Yes, liquidation is actually a big risk, especially if the market grows. That's why in our aspect, I mentioned earlier, for the long tail assets, I don't expect to see those assets or those markets to grow really big, but there will be a lot of activities, but not necessarily grow to hundreds of millions, because lending markets can only grow in tandem with liquidity, DEX liquidity. So you could always need to liquidate, and I think AAVE, we've learned a lot from them. We've learned from, of course, Compound. Actually, the main one is the one that basically created the standard honestly. And that's why they garner a lot of respect. So yes, the liquidation process and how they managed. But then we had to also, so our code is built from the ground up. So we've never forked anything for many reasons. If you want, we can talk about that. But so we had to also look at liquidations. We had to look at how do we perform liquidations for long tail assets? How do we set this enough penalties for to cover liquidation fees, liquidation costs, all of it really. Obviously, we've come across a lot of limitations, but we cannot upgrade the protocol. Protocol is a protocol, and that's the beauty of it. So we have to live with it until there is a better version. And honestly, that assumption, we've designed the protocol this way so we don't have this lure or sometimes like you're lured to upgrade your protocol because you're succeeding, but then that would be a trap as well for you
Yes.
because releasing is extremely difficult or upgrading is extremely difficult process. It's a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Well, immutability is key, I mean, especially in your opening statement, you believe in decentralization, you believe in the governance process. So, I mean, that says it all. So it's great. I'm glad you can't upgrade it. But I mean, obviously there's there is the desire um, for future growth within the product. I mean, you're obviously not changing things, but is there a chance for like a version 2 in terms of like adding stuff and making things more efficient? Is that something, kind of like just jumping ahead, because I want to chat about your stablecoin, but we can come back to that. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts around like a version 2? Is there like a wish list that's starting to come up? I'm sure there is. Yeah. Okay.
I can tell you probably a drop in alpha. Actually, we've started working on it. I cannot tell
Oh,
you.
nice. Cool. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. It
Okay.
will be a separate protocol. Basically, users will have to migrate liquidity, which is great. But yes, we've been learning so much. We haven't really been aggressive on marketing for that reason, because this V1 is just you introduce. Remember Uniswap V1 and they had the spot price and everyone got wrecked. So it was great
Yes.
learning, right? Hopefully our users have not gotten wrecked yet, or will hopefully never do that with our in V1. But we have been we've faced issues with fragmented liquidity and some assets of it. But yes, absolutely, we have a wish list, and we've been validating that if we could build them or not. Some ideas we could not. Unfortunately, we could not move to basically the scope because of limitation related to blockchain. But the we have actually, I think we're innovating a lot with V2. We keep innovating, so it's going to be hoping it's going to be great.
Cool. I mean, you guys have got 34.850 million in TVL at the moment. I must
On Ethereum, and we have around 10 million on
on
Arbitrum.
ARB.
Yeah, correct.
Yes.
Like a 45
So
million.
what I really like about essentially the presentation that you guys have done is that it's very clear to me. For every protocol that you guys are offering the opportunity for collateral, it's very clear to me, what is available in terms of what can be borrowed, which is great. I don't have to go into the protocol. I don't even have to connect my wallet. I can see it on the face of it. I think from a design UI UX perspective, like, congrats on that, because a lot of projects just completely oversee that. And another thing that I really enjoyed about when I first looked at the project was that you guys are very mindful of the UI and the UX experience, which obviously we know. You've been around for long enough to know that, since 2015, like, one of the things, especially in the last bull, it was kind of like devs didn't really care about presentation. It was kind of like, well, does this thing do what it's supposed to do? And that you can barely read on the box. Yes, it can. We don't care about, let's just get people to engage with this thing. And you guys have taken the time. You've built something that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not sitting here scratching my head. So, if anyone's listening, just go and check out Silo.finance. If you're looking to borrow or lend, just go check it out. I mean, it just really does give you a very comprehensive, and it's a two-step process. It's not like you got to go through, like, you arrive at the landing page, you connect to the app, and you basically can see what's going on, and it's a rare thing. So I know it's such a simple thing, and you're probably like, what's Jedi on about? But it's like, it really is important, because a lot of this stuff is never done. And like when we get asked around, kind of like, like, what is your opinion? What is your opinion? The first thing we say is sort out your UI, like 9 times out of 10. Whereas you guys just completely nailed it. Was that something that you sat down and thought about and discussed, or was it just a natural thing that you guys, okay, well, we got to do this properly?
And not really, and honestly, we're still not happy with it. We're we're
Wow,
still
okay.
giving it like yeah, 5 out of 10, I would say. It's still a
Okay.
complex experience for. We're trying to, but yes, we sure. So if you look at our team composition, actually, I think it tells you the story. So we have a UX UI designer on the team, senior, understands DeFi pretty well. And we also have 3 senior front-end engineers that build very complex TradFi applications, and now they're also DeFi natives. So we want fast app and usable app, which is very difficult to do because you have also dependencies on the graph, and the graph can be not. You could see basically how much we pull these calculations that you see on the UI. It's very complex, and it takes time, and sometimes takes time to load. But yes, everything is thoughtful. We have spent so much resources on making the app as usable as possible, as fast as possible. But it's a long way for us, because we want to provide more tools for the users. For example, a user should not guess when they would be liquidated. For example, if you're collateralizing Ohm, you should know that if Ohm drops by 20%, you might be liquidated. So because you could set alerts, you could work around, you could probably set some other strategies to hedge. So you should not really think about when you borrow on land. And we're trying to get there, but there's so much to be done, and we try to ship things all the time. For example, like we have a dynamic interest rate. Sometimes the rate can go really up. So now we warn users in the UI if they're borrowing too much, if they would trigger those a speed increase in interest. We tell you like, hey, borrow less, for example. Like
Yes.
we try to a little bit advise you, but users will have to make a decision. So it's a long way, but I can tell you it's one of the nicest things to work on in the team, because it's a way to communicate with users. Users complain all the time when they have, rightfully, and we try to respond and try to prioritize and try to sometimes find quick fixes in the UX. So it's a fun process.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from a user experience, like, this is a protocol that I will use. You know what I mean? It's kind of like I've always used AAVE. Within kind of like slap bang in the middle of a bull market, you're using these kind of protocols,
Right.
and I can see that you already have a lot of people that are using Silo at the moment. Like you said, you guys haven't done a huge marketing drive. I don't understand why, but I understand now that I've met you why, because you guys are clearly a team of perfectionists, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see how you guys develop your version 2 and how this thing continues to evolve and improve. So definitely going to be keeping an eye on that. I want to go back to your stablecoin, and I wanted to just kind of test your rationale around why it is that you guys decided that you wanted to have your own stablecoin, and how you guys went about that process.
To be perfectly honest with you, it was one of the growth engineering hack, I would say, because here's the issue. You're a nascent protocol. You're not backed by VCs, so VCs will not necessarily park tens or hundreds of millions in your protocol to give this illusion of safety.
Yes.
So you don't have that, and even if you had like a few, they'd probably be hesitant. So it's very much launching a lending protocol is very much like basically pushing a truck, like a massive truck. It's extremely difficult to really just create this initial like momentum. Basically, really, it's extremely difficult. So you need. I still remember, and it burns my memory really and my heart. I still remember the first million we got. It was like, hey, how do we get this TVL? Because users will not trust a protocol without enough TVL. And also, you need it. You need a TVL because without capital, there's really lending markets do not exist, do not function. So it was just an idea for us. Okay, well, stablecoin. If you find a stablecoin, if we can extend the credit lines, users could borrow them with collateral, and that would bootstrap these markets. At least there is now two people, even if it's a little liquidity, but at least users can realize the benefit of risk isolation. Risk isolation is very much like you're flying, and there's an extra mechanism of safety. If something happens, there's a parachute that basically rescues you, really. But users will not know until there's an accident, right? And unfortunately, we've seen this with Cream, with the recent hacks, and with so many of them, like Mango markets, economic attacks, risk, right? So so back then it was just an idea of, well, how do we get the first $500,000 in the market, or $1 million in another market, right? So we've kind of come up with, and we've used our protocol on liquidity of CVX so we thought like, all right, let's go with this simple stablecoin. You could borrow it. You have to over collateralize it, over collateralize an acceptable collateral. Not every collateral can borrow it. And then we create a curve pool. The curve pool will basically maintain the peg, and will be just a peg against USDC. And then users could also, and we use our protocol on liquidity to seed the pool, so we could always liquidate if we need. And hopefully, and we hope that the Zai would also generate a profit or revenue, and then we would recycle the revenue as incentives to basically grow the protocol. And this is exactly what we've done. We've created that. Zai got that kind of to a couple of millions, and we've created kind of like, we validated this idea. We got enough TVL, people liked it, and that brought more liquidity. This is on Ethereum only, by the way. It does not exist on Arbitrum. So that got more liquidity, and then we generated revenue. We started buying back the token and drop it strategically on certain markets, specific actions, and that got us more TVL. And this is how we actually really bootstrapped of the protocol. It was just, and people started now. We started pushing some marketing, and people started to realize that this is a non-upgradable protocol. It's secured TVL for a long time. Maybe I'll give him a chance. But this is a natural process. We haven't really, we just helped the process to happen. And this is why we haven't pushed much on marketing. We wanted things to happen in a kind of more of an organic way. And it happened that way.
It's always the best way to do it. I mean, we've seen it with so many projects that it's interesting. I mean, it's not to say that a lot of projects that push an aggressive marketing drive aren't going to do well. They do. But we find the projects that almost entrench themselves into people's minds through a process of education, understanding community, and fair governance are the projects that actually land up doing really well over an extended period of time. And I think that's what you guys are seeing right now, is that we don't have to force it. We don't have to get the crowbar out. We don't have to, do all these fancy things. All we got to do is stay true to what it is that we're about. Let's not bullshit people. Let's admit when we make mistakes. And it's interesting because like we always make fun of how like people can be like really silly, and they like get attracted to all these like scammers and like stupid ideas. But then that's the one side of it. There's the other side where there's like a lot of really intelligent people who really value consistency and solid ideas, and more importantly, the execution of those ideas. And I think that's a rare breed. It's like a rare breed that DeFi really does cultivate for the long-term player. I really believe that. Like, I could probably like get all philosophical about this, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially in a bear market, you don't have a choice. But like you said, I think you mentioned you have to be true to yourself. So we have set of values internally. So we really go slow, ship extremely slow. Smart contracts engineers should be awarded really like a sort of I don't know, man. They go through a lot when they ship
Yeah.
contracts. It's an emotionally exhausting process because you're responsible. And that's why a lot of them are anons because of community can be harsh on them. They are the reason we exist today, the reason DeFi exists today. So we should just be kind of more graceful. And this is what, and honestly, I'm really happy to see with the recent community receiving the Euler hack as a kind of in a more positive way of supporting the people because we're
Yeah.
humans, right? But
Yeah.
anyway, so we go really slow. Number one. Number two, we want to be around when DeFi becomes mainstream. This is not a pump and dump project. This is a
Mm.
company. This is a community we're building. So third, patience. I mean, we practice patience really. So community pushes us. We go really fast on kind of like experimenting with ideas, but this is just marketing and business. But when it comes to shipping contracts, no, we'll be like
Yeah.
turtles, like really move slow. And like exactly you say, just it's a long-term play, and you want to be around when market conditions kind of mature to position your product better in DeFi. And honestly speaking, there isn't really any way to build community, but through this like it's slow burn. It has to go through really slow because you're earning trust every day. You secure TVL on in DeFi, it earns you a little bit of trust, and that's why AAVE V3 today can attract $1 billion, over $1 billion. Although it's a new protocol, it has nothing to do with V2, but it inherits all the trust in the community, and it deserves that trust. And because it's gone through that process. So
Mm.
in DeFi, eventually will be like a kind of a couple of base layer protocols that just people trust, and a lot of are built on top of them. And I think those base layer protocols, and we try to position ourselves that way. We have to build that way. There's no
Yeah.
way around it.
Yeah. So I mean, I want to chat about that as well in terms of the base layer because I completely agree with you. I think the projects that are really starting to understand the way that this game needs to play are the projects that are actually building the facilitation and the ability to actually create a network effect. It's kind of like it's almost like a standard thing now. It's not just about, building a perps protocol. I mean, for example, like GMX, GMX is I think being the one, and we always talk about GMX. It's such an easy one to put out there, but it's true because their business has primarily been not around the perps, but more around the network effect that they've created around their product, to the extent that everyone's just building around them and building on top of them and using. And that's the real essence of what this whole thing is about, that so few people understand yet, and it's like now we're seeing other protocols coming in on all chains where they're like, okay, well, it's not just good enough for me to do my own thing. I got to make sure that I facilitate and allow for the growth of whatever it
Right.
is that I'm creating.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I
Right.
find fascinating.
Fascinating, and this is one of the big one of the it's a big learning for us because
Yeah,
when you build back then, when you code, when an engineer codes, back then we coded just for ourselves, our
yeah,
problems. Now in V2, we're coding for two users. We're basically the borrower and depositor, and we're also coding for the community. We're coding for the developer community because the community needs to integrate with you. If you want to be a base layer, you have to develop for them. They're first. So, and that's a huge shift of mindset, by the way, because you have to now you're basically building for two different users, a protocol and a user. So that's a big learning. I think GMX people nailed it really well.
yeah. I think, but the thing is that this is where we're gravitating. So even though it is tough and it's kind of like this, like you have to step outside the box, you don't really have a choice. It's kind of like, this is what you subscribe to. And it's like, okay, well, let's do it. So I'm really looking forward to see how you guys are going to do that from from an expansive perspective, because now it's like, okay, well, it's not just about us. It's about how do we expand this thing. We know it works. we've got all the ingredients, and now let's just put it out there and see what comes back. And it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, this is what I love about this. This is why I just don't get tired of doing this, is because nothing is the way that it seems today tomorrow, because it's going to change, and it's going to change. Especially with solid projects, it always lands up changing for the best. I mean, we've been working with some projects where, like we get presented with the idea, yeah, we're going to do this. Like when we first started working, like because we initially worked with GMX, and it was like we wrote the article on GMX. No one knew what GMX was about, and it was like, okay, well, it's a perps exchange and GLP, and it's like, and now I look at it and we like look back and we're like, well, maybe we need to update this article now, and then. Which we are going to do. They're also doing a version 2, but it's just really, it just speaks to where we're going. I mean, there's a whole lot of projects on Solana that are doing it. I mean, it's just great, like it's freaking awesome. I wanted to just, seeing as though we're talking about, the secondary and the tertiary user, tell us a bit about your governance process, because I think that's really important in terms of what your ethos is, in terms of the Silo DAO itself, and the value that you guys have placed into that.
And that value is probably only in our head, by the way, because back I remember because back in the day, we're like really decentralization maxis. We raised through a decentralized auction open to everyone. And we wanted a protocol that is governed by token holders. So right now, anyone can deploy a market. It's basically permissionless. However, this market will not be active until the community votes on what oracle to use or to connect to the market, because oracle and lending is everything. If you read the token price correctly, then you have a healthy market. So we let token governance basically votes on that, and we think we thought that would be the right way, because then you could trust if it's a secure feed to use or not. And pretty much governance today can change the settings of the market, like what oracle to use, how much loan you can take against your collateral. Protocol fees, for example, of set 10% on Ethereum. If you want to increase it, decrease it, those kind of things. If you want to register a new price provider, we trust Chainlink, for example, today, and Uniswap v3 TWAPs. But if there's another Oracle provider, we can register it in the protocol, so we could use it in the future. So that's kind of really the governance process. We implement the Open Zeppelin governance Bravo. This is 3 days of voting, 2 days of queue before execution. So it's a total of 5 days. Token holders can delegate their votes either to themselves or to other delegates in the DAO. It's a completely decentralized protocol. However, that created a lot of issues for us, because we could not go fast, because you had to wait for the governance process. Yes. And especially if you're a new project, you don't have many motivated community members to vote. It's also expensive, and it's put a lot of pressure on the team to always create those proposals, because they have to be also, like, every proposal we create have the coding process. Before you release it, there'll be QA, and you have to write tests, and it could be a simple governance process to change a collateral factor, for example, right? You have to make sure you don't really mess up. So that created a lot of pressure on the team. The resources, instead of building for V2 or trying to think about those, or building vaults on top of that, 50% of the process went on creating proposals, because we thought users would value decentralization.
Yes.
Because they would say, for example, no, I'm going to use Silo because these markets are DAO permissioned. Not everyone can change, or anyone can change them arbitrarily. However, and then when you use the reality is, that's why I said in our head, the reality is, unfortunately, no one really, I say that really hesitantly, but very few people care about decentralization, because we've seen protocols today, we even see them completely managed by multisigs, even lending protocols that have upgraded the protocol without you knowing, through a multisig, and that created issues. And we see that all the time. But it seems that, of course, you can ship fast this way.
Yes.
But it seems that users really don't much like appreciate that. So that's why I said, like, well, it's
So where do you? I mean, this is really interesting. I mean, it's kind of like ideology is X, practicality is X minus Y. So what is the end result? What is the happy medium here? I mean, where do you see? Is there a happy medium, or is it one or the other?
there is a if you minimize or remove governance, like Uniswap, for example, that would be the best way. Just leave governance to handle few issues, like few things, but not related to the protocol. That would be like the best approach in my opinion. I mean, yes, you want to manage treasury. Of course, in our case, they manage treasury as well, which is extremely important. But as far as the mechanics of the protocol, that gets really complicated. Unfortunately, I think today DeFi people don't believe in decentralization much. Some probably because it's a byproduct of how DeFi is set up today. For example, like price feeds that support pretty much the entire protocol, and it's not decentralized fully, right? We see bridges are not decentralized. We see L2 sequencers are not decentralized. So it's probably in the user's head, well, I don't place much value on it because, well, everything is not decentralized. So, right? So if it's that's why probably it. So honestly, we're not ready yet for full decentralization as far as even the protocol. So, but the best approach is to minimize that, to just just make it like a business and community building rather than, yeah.
It makes sense that kind of like the pertinent aspects to a protocol, especially around treasury, would require governance, especially if you're going to go and put up a proposal. Well, especially if you want to buy yourself a Lamborghini and it's kind of like you just go and buy it. Well, that wouldn't really be cool. I mean, you saw the
Yeah.
counter to the arbitrum governance proposal, where I think it was 1inch actually put up a proposal for a Lamborghini. I think they were trolling, but it's kind of like it
Right.
definitely does speak to that. I think I do agree with you. I mean, I'm definitely a DeFi maxi. I really do see the value around it, especially if you've got a scenario where governments are trying to prevent crypto from flourishing. I mean, we know we've chatted about this you and I before, but it's like that's important. You really do need that aspect. We know that Bitcoin ultimately is probably one of the most powerful networks that humans have ever built. Why? Because not one person or not one organization controls the network, and that value is incredibly important. But I do agree with you. You do need to be able to run this thing without having to consult with somebody at every step of the way. Because if you do,
Yeah.
I think it takes a special group of people. I mean, I know that there are DAOs out there that do it and they're fine with it and they do it successfully and they still ship. But I can see that it takes a lot of time. I can see it. It's like this really tedious and it takes a lot of resources. Yeah, I can see that. So there is obviously the compromise. So then you get to do it in version 2, sir. I mean, it's really that simple. It's kind of like,
Right.
well, we now know and we get
Right.
to do it all over again. And
Yeah, totally. And I think it's also, we thought about it from also a legal framework like perspective. Our token has always been really a clear utility because just simply we need it. You need it to actually vote and to deploy to vote for extremely important components in the protocol.
yeah,
But we didn't do that for that reason. We just really wanted users to own the protocol, and it is a DAO right now. We have over kind of like 70 delegated users, and token holders place a lot of trust in them, and at least there is a visibility. At the very minimum, there is a visibility. Any change to the protocol, you could see it instantly on Tally. It's automated. Any blockchain proposal that kind of related to our governance, it just pops up. So you could see at least if there's someone is rugging, you could exit. So that's the very minimum, really. And multi-sigs is not necessarily the praise. They can make the change and inform you later if they inform you ever.
Yes, I totally. I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen it with so many protocols. It's like the dynamic. I mean, that comes into like something that I'm really curious about, because you don't often see this, is that there's obviously a buyback program that you guys implemented. What is the rationale behind the buyback program around
Yeah.
governance? Yeah.
Well. Basically, the protocol, the DAO now generates revenue, and we
Yes.
thought like, what is the best way to do it? Well, just buy back the token and use it in incentives. We don't have any inflation program right now. We're waiting for vSilo will come later, and hopefully will scale. Well, vSilo should be kind of like the catalyst, really, of of our growth and validation of the risk isolation. Hopefully, not only in Ethereum, but hopefully everywhere. So until then, we didn't want to use the treasury. The treasury right now, by the way, sits on vests around 55% total, 50% total of token supply, which is a massive treasury. So
Yes.
almost
Yes.
like 500 million, exactly. So 500 million. So we could have like a V silo with an inflation program that would last for years to come. So we wanted that when we're ready. So until then, we thought like with the buyback program, we could strategically target specific actions, deposit, borrow in specific markets. We could grow TVL and also learn what works, what doesn't. So later, when we design an emission program that could be informed as well. So that's really the reason. It's one of the also the many experiments that we run.
Yeah. So I wanted to finish off the interview with. I mean, you've given me so much to think about from a version 2 perspective, and it's like right now, in terms of where Silo is at the moment, what do you where do you guys see Silo as kind of like in your mind? I mean, I'm sure this is going to change, and I'm sure that I might even get the opportunity to test you on this later on. But it's kind of like, what does your ideal look like for Silo into the future? How would you like to see kind of like the main things about it, besides, several $billion of TVL, not the obvious stuff, but the more kind of like less obvious stuff?
Yeah. I really can sum it up to you with the first thing we said in our documents when we launched. It's going to be the Uniswap of lending, and
Okay,
everywhere you go.
nice. And you guys would like to be pretty much on all chains doing exactly what Aave has done, and kind of like replicate that level of success in your own way. I mean, that's ultimately what you guys are looking at, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to have a lending market for every token asset on in the blockchain, in the EVM compatible blockchain, right? Um, and that is just a very ambitious feat, I would say, because it takes a lot of work. So, and we're actually, but that's really our thesis has never changed. We, of course, the implementation is going to be different, but the thesis still exists. If a token, if a market finds two counterparts, it should exist. And
Correct.
the scalability of that market will depend on the DEX liquidity and the community behind those tokens that form that market. And that's it.
So from a version 2 perspective, I mean, obviously version 1 embarks to achieve exactly what it is that you've spoken about. Now, what does version 2 look to do? Maybe there's a little bit of alpha in that question, well, in the answer that's
Yeah,
coming.
it solves the scalability issues and fractionalization of liquidity.
Okay. Because that
Right.
is the biggest problem. And especially in a bear market, you kind of like low tides and who's swimming with their costumes and who isn't. So I suppose
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
really
Exactly.
is
Exactly. And vSilo gives tools to concentrate liquidity in the markets they want. So it will be
correct.
up to the users. So it will be a kind
Yeah.
of an incentive to concentrate liquidity. So it would be, for example, you'd have the deepest market of certain assets because of because of, for example, like Curve users use today through Convex, obviously, and other liquid staking solutions, but they concentrate liquidity in pools based on that, actually. Yeah.
Thoughts around kind of like omni-chain functionality, like, like layer zero, and being able to move liquidity around without having to have resident liquidity, like on multiple chains, but having it in one place and being able to essentially deploy it through a messaging system. Have you guys explored that option?
We have not, but it's actually on our head. What we'll
Yeah,
see, I don't know if and it opens incredible doors for and complexity and solutions as well. Uh, uh, a renowned project developer sent me a message a few days ago exactly about that. So I
yeah,
was like, okay, yeah, sure. That would be great. Layer zero, I'm super excited about that because eventually, if you want to look at it from a user perspective, the user really
no.
shouldn't care about
Mm,
where, how they leverage. It should be just an
mm.
easy as simple interface.
I mean, the most fun aspect for me in this space is anticipating what could possibly come next. Um, and I think that's definitely like one of the big ones. I mean, there are a couple of projects that are endeavoring to conquer that aspect of the market. But it's going to be really interesting to see how it evolves, because I think almost always the idea of something doing X, it always changes into Y somewhere along the line. So,
Mhm.
I think there've been, the rise and potentially the fall of a couple of projects that potentially could have got that right. I think Sushi's had a really tough time. I think they've had a plan to do something along this thing, but I think they've got other problems to take care of. But it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves, and then also to see how you guys go about your version 2, and then what comes out of it, what comes out of these ideas, the fact that you guys are thinking about it already. You might land up being looking at version 2.1 sooner than you think, so it'll be
Yeah,
interesting to
so,
see.
absolutely. And I think that's why you need to build a community of believers behind you
Yeah.
because sometimes it's really it's a business at the end of the day, and
Yes.
you're gambling with every version you release. So the best thing we can do right now is to learn as much as possible, and we've learned a lot, but maybe we haven't learned enough. I don't know, but definitely
Mm,
there's a risk, and that's kind of but that's that kind of risk. It's a good it's a good risk because you're innovating as well. Maybe
correct.
like you said, the 2.0 doesn't get it. Maybe 2.1.
Yeah.
That's why we need a good community behind us that can believe in us.
Well, I think that's where the real value of what protocols need to be looking for is not, it's not just about the products. There's a whole idea that, we'll build it and they'll come. It's not true for DeFi. It's like, it's part of it. It's obviously really important. You've got
Mhm.
to be able to deliver, because at the end of the day, especially as anonymous, a lot of anonymity for the reasons that you stated, and you are correct. The only thing that you have as a bargaining chip is your ability to deliver on what it is that you're going to say that you're going to deliver. And if you do that, the success that you will reap is so much more than you will ever see in any other space. It's incredible. It's like, it's one of the most, it's the easiest hack in the space. If you want to be successful in DeFi, just deliver on what it is that you say you're going to deliver on, and look after people, and do those two things, and
Right,
success is yours. It really
right,
is. It's kind of like this red carpet that just gets rolled out for you.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and on that note, sir, thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Um, yeah,
Lovely
I appreciate.
conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate your energy, your passion. It's very obvious that, from my perspective, you in this for the right reasons. It's like you love this. I can see it. It's like, bring it on. You're a complete serial DJ, and like in there just doing it and doing it the right way. So it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you, AJ.
Likewise, appreciate your support, and I really enjoyed the conversation, and I
Yeah,
enjoy our conversation on Discord as well. So appreciate that.
yeah. Yeah, man, you guys, I think, you guys are what DeFi is about, and we just need more of this more of these ideas, more of these discussions, and yeah, let's see version 2. We'll have you back on and we'll catch up again. It's been a pleasure,
Yeah,
sir. Really
likewise.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too, man.